Howdy again everyone. Venus Optics and their Laowa branded lenses have recently been pushing into a new market segment, that of the extremely bright f/0.95s. Labeling these lenses with the Argus moniker, today we will be checking out their 45mm f/0.95 option. It is a full-frame, completely manual lens for full-frame mirrorless cameras, so that's Sony E, Canon RF and Nikon Z mount optics. Its price is $800 or about £750 here in the UK, so it costs just a little more than some of its cheaper competition on the market, but it's still affordable for the experience you're getting here. I'd like to thank Laowa for sending me a copy of this lens for evaluation for a couple of weeks, although as usual this is a totally independent review. This lens's main selling point is, of course, that incredibly bright aperture of f/0.95. It's just over a stop brighter than an f1.4 lens, meaning it can get you an incredibly narrow depth of field in your images. That makes it pretty tricky to manually focus, but boy, when you get your picture just right, nice. Gorgeous pictures are your reward, well, most of the time anyway. Not only does an aperture of f/0.95 give you incredibly out of focus backgrounds, but it lets in much more light to your camera's sensor, enabling fast shutter speeds even in darker situations. Let's put that to the test for a minute. On the left is an image from the Laowa lens at f/0.95, and on the right, one from the Sigma 40mm f1.4 art lens, which has recently become my new workhorse lens for video work. Okay, this is not a perfect comparison because the shot from the Sigma lens is of course a little wider, but even when bearing that in mind, the Laowa lens is still giving wildly more out of focus backgrounds. Its shutter speed is just under twice as fast, so we can see that its light transmission is coming out to twice as bright as an f1.4 lens. You might hope for a touch more brightness than that, but actually it's pretty typical for an f/0.95 lens to see a little light transmission loss here and there with extreme designs. Let's take a look at the lens's build quality. It is definitely on the big and heavy side, weighing 835 grams or nearly 2 pounds, but its aesthetic design is really pleasant. Its build quality, satisfyingly tough and metallic, although not weather sealed. At the bottom comes an aperture ring that can be set to operate with gentle clicks or completely smoothly for video work. Then comes the metallic focus ring, which turns with a very long throw of about 280 degrees, so precisely manually focusing at f/0.95 is not too difficult. Well, unless your subject is moving around, that is. As you can see here, the lens does suffer from noticeable focus breathing as you slowly turn that focus ring around. The lens's filter size is 72mm wide, and it comes with a very narrow but good looking metallic lens hood. Overall, excellent build quality here, although obviously focusing manually at f/0.95 will take a little practice and even patience sometimes. Let's take a look at image quality now. I'm testing it today on a Sony a7R III with its 42MP sensor. As this is a fully manual lens, no in-camera corrections are available here. At f/0.95, we are seeing a classic example of a lens with very good sharpness but low contrast. Still, at least you can always add contrast into your image. You can see a fair bit of ghosting along contrasting edges here. Image quality in the corners actually has a bit more contrast but less sharpness. Let's top down to f1.2. The corners look a little brighter now, however back in the middle we see a very dramatic improvement in contrast and a bit more sharpness too. Stop down to f1.4 for virtually perfect image quality in the middle, and in the corners sharpness and brightness that's also getting better. However, stop down to f2 now for much better image quality in the corners, albeit with just a little colour fringing. f2.8 looks about the same, but f4 and f5.6 pick up a little more sharpness. The lens stays this sharp down to f11, and that chromatic aberration does not go away. Overall, it's a slightly complicated story here. At f/0.95, the lens offers great sharpness in the middle of your images, but somewhat lousy contrast. However, you only need to stop down to f1.2 for a huge improvement there, and image quality in the corners becomes pretty good at f2 or darker. so it's a slightly better than average performance for an f0.95 lens here. Okay, let's take a look at distortion and vignetting. The lens projects only a very mild pincushion distortion, nothing to worry about here. Vignetting is quite another matter though, and unsurprisingly at f0.95, those image corners are very dark. However, stopping down to f1.2, f1.4 and f2 quickly sees those corners brighten up pretty nicely. Alright, let's take a look at close-up image quality now. The lens can focus down to 50 centimeters, a little further than average for one of this kind of focal length. At f0.95, we still see surprisingly decent image quality. Most f0.95 lenses have serious problems at this point, although contrast is still admittedly a little low. Stop down to f1.2 for a big improvement in contrast, and f1.4 for excellent sharpness too. Okay, let's see how the lens performs against bright light. There's no sugarcoating the truth here, it's a bit of a disaster zone, with absolutely huge flaring patterns of all different kinds wherever the bright lights might happen to be, including giant red rings on the periphery. And while we're shooting in the dark, let's see about chroma levels. Bright points of light in the image corners see some colour fringing, some purple smearing, but I've actually seen far worse chroma smearing than this before. At f1.4 it looks about the same, but stop down to f2.8 for a reduction in smearing, and at f4 we are seeing a clearer picture. Let's zoom out and look for sunstars now. They're not very strong on this lens, you have to stop down to about f16 to see anything particularly good. Okay, let's take a look at the quality of this lens's bokeh now, something hugely important for an f0.95 optic, and it is very nice. Getting deeply out of focus backgrounds is easy with this lens, and they are lovely and smooth too when they're deeply out of focus in virtually all situations. It's a clean bill of health here, although at f0.95, specular highlights do have a strong cat's eye shape to them, as usual for a lens like this. And finally, related to bokeh comes longitudinal chromatic aberration. At f0.95 you can see it here, it's strong with very noticeable colour fringing on bokeh highlights. At f1.4 it's still noticeable, but at f2 it's almost gone. Overall, well, what a rollercoaster ride that lens took us on. It has some of the same problems of other f0.95 lenses here: low contrast when shooting wide open, soft corners at the brightest apertures, and some pretty dreadful flaring. However, it does carry a bit more sharpness than its competitors, and contrast quickly returns if you stop down to f1.2. It has better close-up image quality than usual for a lens of this type, and also the quality of its bokeh seems a bit smoother to me, with almost none of the stranger problems that you might catch in other f0.95 lenses. Venus Optics do tend to make better quality lenses than their Chinese competitors, and this lens is superior to them, albeit not by a huge margin. Still, it is one of the sharper f0.95 lenses out there, and I do like the look of its images, so if you can work around its limitations, then it does come recommended. I'm going to be super unimaginative now and end this video in the usual way by thanking all my generous supporters over on Patreon. You are making a huge difference to keeping these tests going. If you'd like to support the channel and get all kinds of bonus content, including a special exclusive video every month, then do check it out in the description below. Ciao for now.